Thanks also to Alan Brennick and Andrew Latimer at Carcanet for their work on Steve's book, to Michael Schmidt for taking the book on with such enthusiasm, and to Clark Coolidge and Ron Silliman, who wrote wonderful blurbs for it. There's an entire history somehow on the back cover alone, and I'm very pleased we were able to achieve that. Thanks also to Carol Rumans, who this week chose the book's title poem, Red Carpet, as her poem of the week in The Guardian. 2 years ago, almost to the day, Michael Schmidt and I were having a general, "So, what are you up to?" exchange over email, and I mentioned that I was planning to edit a book by my good friend Steve Malmude. Steve's selected poems, The Bundle, had been published in 2002 and was now out of print, and Steve had been writing constantly in the years since, not to mention the fact that he had excluded some first-rate poems from The Bundle. He is an exceptionally harsh self-critic. A couple of days later, Michael wrote to say he hadn't been able to find much online, but very much liked the little he had found, and that copies of The Bundle were scarce. Shouldn't there be a collected poems, he wondered, and might Carcanet publish it? I was stunned. Over the coming weeks, the idea of a collected poems was scaled back to a book of 256 pages, which is what Red Carpet would be, if not for the fact that Steve's customary double line breaks in TypeScript on an 8.5 by 11 page simply don't work on a standard book page. We tried them, and the poems looked like they were melting and dripping off the bottom of their pages. And so we arrived at the 225-page book I'm holding in my hand. Yes, we could have added more poems to fill another 31 pages, but we liked the selection and the arrangement as it was. On the one hand, it seems perfectly reasonable to be launching this book on a Zoom call hosted by Carcanet Press. Steve is a tremendous poet who has been writing at a high level for almost 70 years. On the other hand, I still can't quite believe this is happening. Not only is Steve unknown in the UK, but he is also barely known in the States. This past summer, I have mentioned him to people very much of my circle. Not friends, you understand, but people who purportedly inhabit the same literary world as me, elders, to use that unpleasant term, and the usual response has been, "Who's he?" Or occasionally, "He's dead, isn't he?" This after a publishing career or non-career spanning 53 years. Nevertheless, I think it would be unfair to accuse the world of ignoring Steve. Rather, it's that Steve never did anything to attract attention to his work. A certain diffidence obtained, and perhaps obtains still. Others circulated his work for him, editor-publishers, such as Larry Fagan, Jack Kimball, Jordan Davis, and recently Luke Roberts and Amy Tobin in the UK. I first read Steve's work in January 1998, on the day I met Larry Fagan. We met for coffee on Avenue A, then went back to Larry's apartment on East 12th Street, where, after a couple of hours of talk, he went to his closet and gave me a stack of old Adventures in Poetry titles. There were some great things. John Godfrey's first two books, Come by John Giorno, Ready by Curtis Verville, Hand Shadows by Jamie McInnes, but it was Steve's first book, Catting, that grabbed and held me. I was fascinated by it. Yes, there were modernist gestures, collage, cut-up, but the resulting poems were unlike any I had read before or have read since. On occasion, I sensed not that Steve couldn't find the right word, but that there was no right word. So Steve made one up that suited his purpose. I think here of The High Tide, which I believe Steve is going to read today, and the extraordinary ending of Poem for My Wood-Burning Stove, where words crinkle and commingle in the heat. In the short Meet the Author video we made over the summer for Carcanet's YouTube channel, I said that I consider myself lucky to have been able to edit this book, and that, similarly, Steve's poems communicate a feeling of luck to the reader. This latter remark gestures toward the artistic crux, it seems to me, which is that Steve writes his poems in order to find out what they have to tell him and what he means. Over the years, the overt use of collage and cut-up, which Steve used primarily as a means to expand his poetic vocabulary, gives way to a poem made of quatrains. The four-line stanza is his unit or line, often assembled from a palette rather than written sequentially. The palette, in this case, being two ring binders containing thousands of quatrains. Anything Steve has heard, read, or seen that can be usefully accommodated in quatrain form is noted down for possible future use. Steve is concerned with the page and writes for the page, yet there is no Creeley-esque enunciation of the line break. The content is vivid, sometimes visceral, and can be a shock to the reader who finds themselves some 30 years into resentful acceptance of poetry as just another academic subject. Steve was a union carpenter for decades, as well as a lifeguard and aquatics director at the 14th Street Y. Water pageants in Red Carpet is a cut-up of materials Steve used when he was planning such pageants. And his poems locate themselves in the world of blue-collar work, undergirded by a major in literature and a minor in classics. Steve heeded Ezra Pound's advice in ABC of reading and learned enough Greek and Latin to get by. A lasting concern with rhyme, deployed to extraordinary effect in such poems as The Goatman and Danang, derives in part from Steve's early attempt to translate Francois Villon with the end rhymes intact, and his close study of the use and absence of rhyme in Edwin Denby's remarkable sonnets. Steve's poetry is always and endlessly open and available to me in a way that very little poetry is. His poems are lifetime companions. I am absolutely thrilled that we're about to hear some.
Blue tree. I stood like a blue tree early in the morning. The stores were locked about me, the ghosts of women tugging at my sleeve. A smile showed in the foliage, which Joe says he won't shave, and streetlights were switching off themselves, the few stars doing slow dissolves. Ghosts of women at doors of post offices were asking me, slit for letters, this? Good. If Groundhog Day be fair and bright, then winter will take another flight. But if Groundhog Day be dark and gray, the worst of winter has passed away. It is very quiet here in Parsons Field. There don't seem to be any laws passing, only people going to their work and back. It does seem as though everybody is gone. It looks like spring, but it's so quiet. I don't see any children out to play, don't hear much. There aren't many autos passing now, but only people going to their work. You know what Martin Luther said, if the world were going to end tomorrow, I would still plant my little apple tree, especially if the world were going to end tomorrow. Truant. Any fire has more poignancy to a smoker. Cafes with the densest relays of audiences, spelunking a very stretched slinky with a peacock plume. The moon falls in place and seats process men, and water bugs read my mind like quarterbacks. What is lost will return with the luster of being foreign. Angora interlude in the pedigree of a neighborhood, the power of daydreams behind, oh, curl up with me in book form. The high tide. She has a bane. Fish see her again. I can't stop praise. I think about her ways. My liberated hand is smeared, a Greek bright as a slug, wearing the village road or wrapped in a V-black dress. Once again, room where Anne, dawn sickens me. Heavy wings, dice and knuckle. Angel, angel and playina, a gagged aorta, a light prison, a field of azure tinted wheat, a loud sound. Everything is sweet. A crook as well a oar, a cook as well air. Churches dwindle. We are quiet and pale, canopy and a veil. You are under a tapestry rich and heavy as chain mail. I am big as a cloud. Baby bellows out loud. Grandma spoons her gruel from a dish. We are simple and proud. We are tender and soft. Blouse and collar are soft. You are holding baby close, and I am working aloft. I am the last to bed, halos around my head. I beg you not to be morose, but smile and be happy instead. (1980). Every year brings a key ring, tool bits stored in carousel, soft dangle, get sucked in by yourself. Heat from chimneys wiggles atmosphere. Potential memorial maintenance systems. Embrace a volunteer dunegrass planter. Bashful using old-fashioned yours truly's. So the pitched and combined diverbs go. From a thin party line to a rich premonition. Ma, tell me how the wine got on the curtain. Arguing in the spring, the cry of guarantee, the crossword puzzle overlap of property. There are garage doors on the backs of trucks. The rule of suction. Goya's burial of the sardine in the middle of a saucer, lower than all horizons. I am a parachute, touching down like a cut diamond. Soft sigh, thank you sound, wants me to be Canadian, a canoe with a rainbow going out to a license plate. Loving kindness over credulity. The Aquarians are like that. Intelligently helpful and hindering gel columns. Improve on newcomer illusions of being elsewhere, generating a fleeting little group that takes away riches in a cab. The double dace of celebrities from both coasts delaminates humid afternoon in the exercise room, swelling like a rusk in tea. Stevens Institute has sports facilities the people use on the QT. I move my head from side to side so I can see through the Nautilus. Visited. Some form of rough justice as troubled areas rebuild. And I remain present as a workman, all silence and flannel softness. Grover. Grover from Sesame Street. Jim Henson's hidden hands. Some hothouse holds them. Nevermore rely on me, that little dust blossom. A wood shop. I have a silver hair on my sleeve, a drop of glue on the top of my shoe. My cozy wood shop draws sharp eyes. Ah, soon my craft-bound solitude will end. Hay fever. This is not a poem. Hay fever is not a poem. I dropped in on him. After Mary sublet her place to Jim and moved in with me, I dropped in on him. We sat around Mary's table. He paid me the rent, opened the bottle, told me a joke about life in Woodstock, and read me the poem from that time when we were capable of another post-war culture based on rent control. Faunal remains. As Reverie Plus moves me away from the early dream toward water, goal of the animals, men fall into a pool after being faked into the air as others rise seething. A tear promises the air an ace, and I devour my heroes where they are shy G-forces on my face. The anarchy. When the young blood is dying to cut loose, the move that takes them out of frame is love, and the spurious freedom of the empty house tells me they receive a centralized directive. April. April is full of movies. When Bohemia is in bloom, it is protected by bees. Let them do it as a team. And art for art is power via writing all day long. The price for this power is my easygoing song. What am I afraid to say? I can curate my own art. The art of love poetry. Me, a boy out of the ghetto. Isn't art a kind of dirt? The man is now saying no. Perfect front door. My summer is threadbare. These jeans are chains. Always the sense of the futility of maintenance. Yet I feel the cool night air from the open door. Capital crosses the border at will. Why not labor? Line. Poetry as a dot to stare at in secret. My love for brief literary utterances, crushed by the weight of this regret. Swollen with the day's line as always. Blaring. The thing is to know whether one another were blaring in a restaurant setting, within hearing of you name it, hopefully, which means humbly, you are into a diminuendo, the idea, say, of a cafe as the meeting place for misfits. Red carpet. The name they call me in the bosom of her family caused me to believe I was her first true love. Looking into her ways, then averting my gaze, caused me to believe I was her first true love. The illusion of looking in on a concealed world, the story of women laughing as a boy listens in, caused me to believe I was her first true love. Comfortable face subject on a pillow folded back. The romantic abasement I hear about and mock caused me to believe I was her first true love. I am not absolute. She compares me to others. A feeling of mystic superiority supports me. So do I, says the leaf falling off. So do we, say the withered arms and necks of Lake Secocas, canoeing into a whirlpool of the motionless, caused me to believe I was her first true love. Deep happiness that moves me turned inside out. We're primates. Love propagates long waves in a short rope, from Billy on the bottom to baby at the top. We're primates. We climbed as kids innately and took your hand very limply, even lately. Chelsea Sunset. That's Chelsea, the west side of Manhattan. I stumble out of a sort of political headquarters for my peers and take a break on the piers. The sun goes down and the river becomes fiery. Obfuscation is like oxygen to the art market. Disclaiming art, I also want to disclaim merit, leaving behind a boy who imagined my story. Parish Hall. Parish Hall is where most of the readings in St. Mark's Church were given. Parish Hall. The innocent are so few that two seldom meet. Romantic and unusual when they talk at all. Lost in the midst of this docile parish hall, triumph and redemption would seem too pointed. Paul. Paul and Mary play pool. They're at each other's throats. I'm hemmed in between them. I get him out of the pool hall. Out here in the night air, we will walk till we see a taxi. Women make the genetic decisions. They have a way of pooling everything. Informality matters a great deal. His love is no longer of any value. We stand a moment looking out into the corridor of Lower Broadway, then the old historical downtown, and I dream of leaving him behind. We sit on an ancient concrete bench, lighting adequate although subdued. His ears are invisible in full face. The air blows cold on our foreheads. We look at a plaque and I'm ho-hum. Sounds travel further in the cold air. Even when dawn disperses the darkness, I listen to his quiet, and it is a din. I talk about Staten Island and Montauk. Remember another ruinous sunrise, an example that's really burning in me. The sidewalk. People leave, always have, always will, fail to work their affiliative magic. People on the sidewalk around my block try not to roll the deadly turnstile. People employ the language of the leg, known already, but not seen until the beloved model cannot stand still. Many dust storms kick up in her wake. Unforeseen women come to Rome. Vacillation chases the men into place, home, where sane women make them anxious to achieve some kind of purchase or keep their determined distance from accidental slits into exalting vastness. Fire. Now ends the moment of sirens in some nameless Manhattan ravines, whence resonance is my fragility. A mystic moment after fire. Yells I hear as well as utter, fall quiet, then open out genially. Description. Photography had become unsatisfactory. That's why I fell in love with women, because of description. Trying not to let loneliness undermine my legacy. And sometimes the ear fell in love before the eye. It could happen like music, for which we have a notation, rather than like sculpture, for which there is none. While reading, worlds bubble up indoors before us. Our brows hover over libraries where abandoned leisure moves around. Faces crease in grinning well-being, and eyes don't cease to swing while reading silently and imagining sound. Page. Okay. Be a found poem. What appears to be a found poem is more contrived than that. In fact, changing its proportions could be just the ticket. Why have you done this after we have become pleasantly tired? The text has become unacceptable, yet it cannot be discarded. Unresisting. Stone monuments erode, but clit and tongue get along. A white penis is Pete Rose. Toes are where the story is. Pink under her paint, a doorway to duck into, in stone or real on film. We are leaning into curves. A high-minded beauty slides into bed like a boy, radiant, not red, but that you wash is what matters. The subject of shelves of books toils in regions of curls. Only teen milk and honey in the wings of the theater. A woman tucks in her sweater. Roof is the only refuge, suggestive of the high sky, past the unresisting teeth. Comedians. Immerse yourself in the preeminence of the alpha comedians, funny men with the acumen to justify taking them seriously, because laughter solidifies distaste for the unjust and their power, though our own separations have forced me to a level of diplomacy. The Twin Towers. A tree of cracks branches out among the bricks, but the wall does not fall. As the people age in bed, tremors from the street become unusual. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center become precursors of a world at hand where the ineffable sale of its farmland and of every and all people happened. Chucky. Pressure from the press brought about hard surface roads. Flyers for readers began to draw protective crowds. I followed through stretches of woods to factories, cities, and the guiding address where I heard floorboards squeeze under cover of no nave, no mere meeting place for elites, but as if from an acropolis peeking down through side streets. I saw the little nook underslung for chipmunk Chucky of strewn light and subsuming languageless activity. Everything I do today. She jerks him by his coat collar, works to bury her face in it. I check if they move or not. No sign of life all night. The bowl sounded like a bell as I urinated. My mother, taped to her kitchen chair, stretcher, noticed I was no longer so interested in her. What kind of cleanup am I looking at here? Reconciliation came in the time-honored fashion, bobbing a bit in and out close to one microphone. It's mute, so I put subtitles on the screen. I don't think I'll be observing many of those unities. My flair for closure is too serious for anniversaries. I'm this lifeguard with Kierkegaard open on his knees. I watch my mother and father quietly from where I lay. Of course, it blows away everything I do today. Okay.
Thank you so much, Steve. I feel like we should just leave a 5 minutes of silence just to, segue from your reading into whatever happens next. That was what a pleasure. Thank you so much. Are you ready to talk?
I'm ready for anything.
Well, let me just dive right in. I know that we have a few minutes before we open things up, and you mentioned at least once in the poems you read the Poetry Project, and of course the Parish Hall at St. Mark's Church, and I thought we could start there. And I know that as a young man, you sought validation as a poet through the New Yorker. Your early poem, The Goat Man, which is a tremendous poem, you tried repeatedly to get it published in the New Yorker, and were somewhat strung along in this respect because you were a handsome young man, and the poetry editor of the New Yorker had his eye on you, but didn't publish you. And then your partner at the time said, "Look, there's something going on down the block at St. Mark's. Why don't you go and check it out?" And that's obviously where you found your peers, and I know it has a very special place in your heart, St. Mark's and the project.
Yes, I went to the open readings to read, where I was amazed at the whole the fact that there was a church there, and it was a beautiful church. And on one of the readings when I read, where I was reading, someone called Larry Fagan, who came down and basically took me over and told me he would publish my poems. I was surprised, but I was much more gladdened by that. And I proceeded to get involved with all the activities at St. Mark's Church, and I began to see that there was a world of poetry a few blocks away from my house, where I was busy, isolated, trying to translate Francois Villon. Uh, and uh, and so I got involved with the St. Mark's Church, and pretty soon I was very deeply involved in it, and my first book was published, and it disappeared out of the local bookstore very quickly, and that encouraged me greatly. And I forgot all about what you could call, you would call these days the establishment poetry world, including the New Yorker, including Grove Press, including New Directions, and all those places where I wanted to be, desperately wanted to be, but didn't have the guts to approach or to petition or to submit. In fact, I never submitted my poems anywhere, and this kind of thing, which you might call a purity or a naivete, was basically a lack of courage, a fear of rejection. I had had enough rejection in my life that I couldn't take anymore, and so I never risked it, and I didn't have to. I found many accepting people in the poetry project, some of whom, most of whom were men. Uh, I had always had a problem since puberty. I had problem, getting along with men. Actually, I sort of got angry. Yeah, I was an angry guy. At the same time, I was kind of hot, so I got along very well with women, and but this introduced me to a wonderful group of men, the most interesting kind of men that I could meet, and pretty soon I began to realize that I was a poet, and I had a poet's world ready-made for me there, and I had people working for me like Ann Waldman and Larry Fagan, and Reverend Garcia, the Reverend of the church, was extremely friendly to everybody. Reverend Garcia became a personal friend. He came to the pool where I was a lifeguard to work out, and I had many great conversations with him. And then there was the sexton of the church, Steve Facey, who took wonderful care of the church. There was Bill McKay, who was the first editor, I think the first editor of the Poetry Project newsletter. I used to meet him at a restaurant very often. Anyway, the church was supported by very, very, very capable people who did it for no money, and who, of course, in those days, it was easy to have no money. Not only, yeah.
Well, I just know that we should open this up very soon, but
Okay.
On my bullet list here, I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
Pick one of the following: the distinction between the first and second generation New York school poets, your childhood in Brooklyn, language, ethics, and Benedetto Croce,
Oh,
the primacy of poetry, or
let's
the
go
world.
the first and second generation. Let's do that one.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
chose that one.
Yeah, I would be. I think it would be better if the second generation uh, of the New York school. And by the way, it can be distinguished very easily. I know some people don't like labels, but there's a wide gulf between the first and second generation. It amounts to a gulf of class, really. The older, the first generation were allied with rich artists, and and had a symbiosis with the rich artists and rich people through the rich artists, and all the connections they had in the Museum of Modern Art, and many other places, galleries, all kinds of places. Yeah, second generation different. Second generation was very random, lots of different kinds of people. Um, Middle class and lower class people, and dealing with and exploring a much broader version of American life. And by the way, just as skillful, just just as skillful as the first generation, though their skill was not fetishized at all. Um, it's true, they were more self-destructive, they lived more dangerously, but they were very close to me because I was just like that myself. Um, anyway, yeah. What was another topic? Yeah.
Well, we have no questions as yet from our other listeners, but I have plenty to ask you. But I've got the box open in case anything pops in. But I know you were keen to talk about your childhood, coming from a Jewish intellectual family that had fallen on hard times, I suppose.
Yeah. I had a very powerful figure in my family. His name was Joachim Probst. He was a painter, and he was a friend of the abstract expressionists, and he was well known during his lifetime downtown in the village, and uh, he he was a representative of the figure of the artist to me, and my family my my family was the kind of Jewish family that didn't succeed, and so we my father never earned any money, and my mother worked very hard to support us. We lived in a housing project in Brooklyn, and my parents were always fighting, and so I spent my lifetime basically out of the house, on the street, with mostly poor kids who were extremely intelligent for all that. Don't let anybody tell you that the poor are not smart. They're really smart. And most of my friends were Black, and most of my life was spent as a kind of you know I I ran around, um, annoying adults. I was in a sort of gang. And at the same time, I went to the Jewish Center, and at the same time, I was in a class that was for the especially intelligent. So I had several lives all the time, and this carried on into my later life, where I also had several lives. I was I was an aquatics expert, lifeguard, instructor, etc. I was a carpenter, and I was a poet. I was three things, and I could go from one to another, very easily, because I had done that when I was a kid. I was a lot of different kinds of people at the same time. Uh, that's been the hardest part of retirement, giving up that other world of men, the world of the world of, and in those days it was a wonderful thing to be a workman because the unions were still powerful enough to protect you. I did make enough money to retire, although I'm very frugal. We can live on actually what the union did for me, and the union also contributed to the education of my two daughters. Um, and you know, and I politically, I am basically, I believe that capitalism could work if they would only allow the unions to be strong. It would be better for them, you know. Anyway, yeah. So I ended my career as a carpenter, you know, with a civil service job, which is the most. Anyway, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What's
Alan Bernheimer asks about why you moved to Maine. I mean, obviously, Maine was always in the background, but why you moved there in 2002.
Well, it was one of my mother's dreams to own property. She had lived all her life in Manhattan and was a guest at her more prosperous friends' country places. And so when I graduated from college, I decided to go look for a place. And I looked all over New York State, um, but I didn't like how flat it was. I didn't really like it, uh, and I saw an ad in a real estate circular for this place. Well, not actually this place, but this town. Yeah, and so I came up here, and I was really delighted by the feeling of Maine, the air, the cleanliness, and the welcome I got from the people here. You know, much more than from New York State. The people here were so glad to see me. Of course, they did want to sell me property. We bought property. My whole family bought property in common up here. Anyway, to make that long story short, we bought some property just outside of town, 110 acres, with no house. I built a little shack there. Then my mother decided to move up here because she had adopted my cousin and didn't want to bring him up in the city. And so she bought this house that I'm living in. My mother did, and she became a nurse, an instructor in nursing education in one of the colleges here. And so basically, I would come up here. One of the reasons why I never went to Europe or anywhere, I've never been out of the country because of this place. I had to come up here to maintain contact and to actually repair things and do building here, you know, for my mother. And so I'm up here basically because I know this place. It's been a second home. I had a lot invested in it ever since my late 20s, and people know me here, and so this was a home for me. And besides, I really do love Maine. I'm sad to see it's sort of changing into a kind of Connecticut, but I guess that's inevitable. Okay, so yeah, that's why I came here. I came here because it was easy and because I loved it, and you know, oh, and also because my mother, to please me, bought a house on a lake, and that meant I could swim whenever I wanted to, and do my canoeing and have the lake there, you know, because I really love lakes. And yeah, it's a great place. That's why I'm in Maine. Yeah, tell Alan should come and visit us.
I I don't want Sarah is coming up as Jonathan Malmude. I think that's Sarah. I don't want you to feel that I'm ignoring you, Sarah. I just am aware that we have about 5 minutes, and I'm wondering if I can bundle Alex and Larry Price's questions together and just see what you say, Steve. Larry says that he is curious about your description of your early life as being dangerous, as opposed to what he hears as remarkable syntactical and lexical precision, and that your decisions are always outstanding. Is he seeing a change over time here? And Alex says that you recently spoke to her about the mystery of language and the invisible logos, how poetry can write the poet. And for her, this came through particularly strongly in the poem Description. Can you speak on these mysteries, please, Steve, and on the metaphysical or invisible nature of language?
Oh yes, yeah. It's something
In
that's so
4 minutes.
obvious. Yeah, yeah. The most mystical thing about language is the most obvious is that it has no physical reality. If you can talk about spirit at all, you have to say it's language. Language is actually spirit, and I believe that there are some people who say that language comes second after reality, but I think that for people it depends. It depends on how much contact you've had with language. If you've time traveled into the past, and language is really the only way to time travel into the past. I actually escaped into language. The people I met through language. Right now, the people I'm meeting, like right now, I am reading Hardy for the second time, cover to cover. He is keeping me company. He is my man friend. Thomas Hardy is because we share a lot. I mean, I've learned a lot about writing from Hardy, and I've learned a lot about attitude. He is very good for the mental health. In other words, he's really great company. He's a good friend, and he's not alive. That's the amazing thing. He's not alive, and language is the way you can keep company with dead people. But I think you have to need that. I think, yeah, you have to need that, and I definitely did need that. And we've always, when I was a child, I had tons of comic books, big stacks, 2 foot high, and so did everyone in my building. On rainy days, we would walk around trading. And comic books are pretty well. They were pretty good. These days, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, yeah. So language is basically spirit. That's that's and poetry is hyper spirit. Yeah.
We looking at the time, we have a few minutes, and this is sort of preposterous, but I feel like it would be more preposterous not to ask. We talked a little earlier before this Zoom session about the extraordinary times that we're living in, and I got the sense that you felt that there was an opportunity for poetry there somehow.
Oh yes. Yeah. If you follow what's going on closely, well, yeah, there's an opportunity for poetry in relief. Opportunity for relief. When the Ukrainian war started, I became very frightened of Russia, even though I my main literary influences, I think, are Russian. I mean, my attitude towards poetry is Russian, and although I don't speak Russian, that sort of bars me. I've done all I could to get close to Pushkin, through Nabokov and so on. But anyway, I was so afraid that Putin would get angry at us because of you know because of what we're doing, and and writing poems about that, not about Putin or Biden or Trump or who's right, who's wrong, or whatever, but writing poems about the fear, writing poems about being the only one who's willing to talk about the fear. You know, there's a kind of a fascinating nested reality that we're going through now that I think should not mount on top and exploit language. I think language should exploit it. I think language should exploit digital reality. I think it deserves to still. That's what I feel. Yeah, and I think it's the most exciting time to be a poet, but it's also the riskiest. It's so easy to take an easy road. It's like it's easy to take an easy road in music now. You know, you can publish your own this and that. You it's in a way it's better not to be published at all than to be published poorly, you know, in a futile way. Anyway, I shouldn't have said that, but because you know, but that I would have wound up not being published at all if it were not for my extraordinary luck, good luck. And I've been lucky in being in my whole reality. You know, I'm willing to admit that, kind of privileged in that way.
Anyone? Anything else? Thank you so much, Steve, by the way. It's 3:01. Zoe, I'm not quite sure when the curtain comes down.
We have a few more minutes. If anyone has another question.
I'm happy to step in. Also, I don't want to over occupy the space here. Well, Sarah's question earlier was what goes into your writing process, Steve, and I just hesitated.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to say something about
that. Okay, good,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I do start with the subject. There are certain things I want to say, yeah, but where to start, I don't know immediately. They usually start with a stanza that comes to me. Either it just comes to me or I hear somebody say it. It's as if a tree would grow from the twigs towards the trunk, you know. I have all these twigs and twigs and twigs, and I move them around, and this to me is not drudgery. I spend time moving things around. And by the way, that's another great thing about language and the fact that language is spirit. With a painting, you fuss with it too much, it turns into mud. Not true of language. You can fuss forever with a poem. And if it seems to turn into mud, you just leave it alone for a while and come back in 2 weeks or sneak up on it, and it'll look fresh to you. And you'll see exactly what's wrong with it. You can do that till your poem is great. You can do that. I am directly in opposition to what Allen Ginsberg says, first thought, best thought. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. When you have this opportunity to work on language forever, I'm sure it's been done. What amazes me most about Hardy is that he has written 800 pages of poems, each of one of which would take me 6 weeks to write. And you know, with that degree of form, and he obeyed rules, lots of rules, you know, like a good Victorian. So yeah. So that's how I work. I work from the outside in, and at some point it snaps into shape. Or at some point, it turns into something better than I intended. And that's really exciting. And I'm surrounded by smart people, and I, I do not hesitate to write down what they say. Yeah. And sometimes I clean it up. Sometimes I dirty it up. It depends on what fits on with what I'm working. I have endless capacity to revise, and I recommend that highly, especially if you're young. Now I feel like I don't have time, but I used to sit around all night, and I meant that literally about the line. Sometimes I'd get a one line, and and the fact that James Joyce did that was was encouraging for me. Although I never really expected to do anything to equal what James Joyce did, but now I find things wrong with James Joyce. It makes me feel more important. There's things I don't like about James Joyce and even Ezra Pound as people. I look at them as people now because I've lived so long. And in judging their lives, I think in many ways these writers were fools, but look at what the world's become. You have to be smart in order not to commit suicide these days, it seems to me. Yeah. Or to be considering it. I mean, if you consider what it would be like for a nuclear weapon to land on New York, what would that be like? I think about that because I was trained to think about that when I was a kid. We went even before the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were ducking under desks to hide from nuclear bombs. I knew what a nuclear bomb was. I have very little ability to suppress painful thought. I can't do that. So I live with it, and poetry helps me do that. Yeah. I can share it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Anyone they'd like to ask while we're still here? Thank you, Zoe, too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's the evening in England, the afternoon here, the morning just, no, it's just early afternoon on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But here we all are. It's lovely to see everyone, or to sort of see everyone.
Oh, let me thank Michael Schmidt.
Go ahead.
I don't want to forget Michael Schmidt, and it made me feel very close to you when you said that you liked that poem about Abelard. Yeah.
All right, we'll pass that on.